So if you do have a Bible, do have Matthew chapter 19 open. It's one which I've picked specifically because of the type of day we've had today, but actually it's a really important part of the Word. The passage that Paul just read for us, if you noticed, it had two very different but interconnected stories. And within these two stories, when you put them together, it has the core of Christianity within it. It tells us what Christianity is about. It tells us what the fundamental issues are that human beings face. And it tells us what leads us towards God and what leads us away from him. And actually, in the light of what we've done earlier in the service when we dedicated prayer to God, it tells us that if you want to get what being a Christian is about, then she, as she is today, is a living, breathing illustration of what it means to become a follower of Jesus. She tells us what is required if we are going to become one of his family. I'm going to circle back to that in a little while, but initially we're going to spend some time looking at the conversation the young man has with Jesus. Because as we look at this, we're going to see what's necessary to become a Christian, and we're also going to see how this guy doesn't get it, how he leaves distraught. We're going to see how a conversation where someone meets Jesus, hears what he's got to say and goes away sad, again, tells us everything we need to know about what it means to follow Jesus. And so the way we're going to do this morning is we're going to do a number of things. We're going to look at the young man. We're going to look at the question that he asks. We're going to look at how Jesus answers him. We're going to look at the explanation Jesus gives. And then we're going to see how someone like Freya unlocks it all for us. And I know that's 5 things and that sounds like quite a lot, but I promise you it won't be quite a lot. So we begin with the young man. And because this incident is in other Gospels, we get a few things which we can piece together from other parts of the Bible which really flesh out what this man is like. From what we've got here, we know that he is a young man. And to describe him in this particular way as a young man was to describe someone as in the peak of their life, top physical condition. So that's about 46, obviously. Obviously. Hey, you're laughing, but yesterday after going to the cinema, Zach told me I looked exactly like Ant-Man. So, hey, I'm going with that. Or I'm taking Zach to Specsavers. It's one or the other. So he was probably a little younger than 46. He's someone at their peak with all of their hair, all of their teeth, no varifocals, all of that sort of stuff. He's someone with the world at their feet. He's young. And he's also done really well for himself. We can find out from the passage he's rich. And in the world that people of the day lived in, to be rich and to be well off was a sign to them that God was blessing that person. To be successful and to have stuff made people think, hey, you've got a good life. You must have done good things in order for you to have a good life. Because you've done good, God has blessed you. And I think to a general degree, we still might see things that way. People have a good life because they're generally good, kind, respectable people. So he's young, he's rich, people think he's good. And on face value, taking him at his word, he's a respectable guy. When Jesus fires off a list of the 10 commandments at him, he doesn't pause and say, no, that's not me. I can see how I don't do those things. He actually says, I've done that. I've done that. All of that list of stuff you've just given me, Jesus, I've done that. And so giving him the benefit of the doubt and saying that he's not deluding himself, we can say this about this young man. He's sexually faithful because he doesn't commit adultery. He doesn't cheat people. He's a man of integrity. He looks after and cares for his parents. He has an eye out for anyone he might help in life. He loves his neighbor and all of that sort of stuff. He's a good guy. Everything about him screams to us that this is a nice guy. He's the sort of person you would want to be your next door neighbor. He's a pillar of the community. And from the other accounts of this particular moment, we can layer on top of all of these things, he's a religious guy as well. He goes to the synagogue, he's a ruler. He seems perfect. And this man, who seems to be getting everything right, who is good, and moral and respectable and slightly younger than 46, is going to have a conversation with Jesus where he goes away sad. Literally, he goes away distraught. He goes away grieving. He goes away with a sense that he is far, far from God. When Jesus speaks to him, the nice guy finds out that he's finishing last. And rather than being in, rather than being part of God's family, he's out. And we've got to tease out why that's the case. And to tease out why that's the case, we have to now explore his question. So what does he do? He comes to Jesus, and other accounts, like I say, they have him coming and running and falling on his knees, and he just asks Jesus one question. What good thing must I do to get eternal life? What good thing must I do to know that God, if he exists, is okay with me? How can I have peace of mind? How can I have peace about what's going to happen in life? How can I know that when I die, everything's going to be okay? How can I know that whatever life throws at me, I've got peace and I'll get through it? Even if I get the worst possible news, what's going to keep me so that I don't just fall apart when it happens? He's gone to Jesus and essentially said, when I face my end, how can I face that moment knowing everything is going to be okay? Because I know God will look on me favorably. That's his question. What good thing must I do to inherit eternal life? There's a deep series of questions behind that one question. And I think it's a question that at different times and to different levels, we all ask these questions. We all ask things like, what's going to happen when I die? If there is a God, how can I be right with him? I know at times we might put the blinkers up and just avoid our own mortality, but sometimes it just hits us. And this is what's going on with this guy. He wants to know, can I have no matter what peace of mind? Can I have no matter what kind of peace in my heart? And he's gone to Jesus and he's looking for the one thing that he needs to do, which is going to seal the deal. It's quite an interesting thing that's happening here. This young man is grappling with a really, really big question. And what's really clear is despite his good reputation, despite his good life, despite all of the things that he doesn't have any peace. Because he comes to Jesus and he's got that sense of, is there something more I need to do? Is there another hoop I need to jump through? Is there something which will finally and forever tip the scales in my favor? For those who've been to this church before, I know I've used this illustration before, so I apologize for that, but I really quite like it. This young man is like the character in Saving Private Ryan, who when you start that film, you see him as an old man walking towards a grave. He's walking towards the grave of the soldier who has saved his life. And then most of the film is a flashback which shows you why this guy is still alive and how he was saved. How a group of soldiers were sent back into enemy territory simply to save him. And they succeed, but at a cost. Because in the film, the commander who's been sent to save him, there's a moment where he's secured his life, but he's been fatally wounded at the same time. And that man, played by Tom Hanks, the last words that he whispers into the soldier's ears are this: earn this, earn this. And when the film flashes back from that moment to the present day, this old man by the graveside is distraught. And he is talking to the grave. He's talking to the man and he's saying, every day I think about what you said to me on the bridge. Every day I think about this. And then as his wife comes to him, he says those words that are on the screen. Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me I've been a good man. He doesn't know whether he deserves what the man on the bridge did for him. He just doesn't know. Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me I'm a good man. And here's the thing about Christianity. That's not where Christianity is supposed to leave you. It's not supposed to leave you thinking, what's the one more thing I need to do which is going to seal the deal? Properly understood, it leaves you at the total opposite end of the scale, knowing that you have peace with God, knowing that you're right with him, knowing that all will be well no matter what. This man who comes to Jesus is asking, what is the thing that I must do to seal the deal? How good must I be? I wonder if that's a question that's in your heart today. What must I do to know that if there is a God, I will be all right? The answer should be absolutely astounding. When Jesus gives this young man the real answer, it should be astounding to us. But at face value, at first glance, it looks like he just plays into what the young man's saying. So in response to the question, what must I do? Jesus says to him, keep the commandments. And he lists a load out for him. He says, gives a very specific list. He says, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, be a man of integrity, love your father and mother, look after your neighbour. And this young man, and he's a remarkable guy, is able to look at that list of things that Jesus says to him about how to live, and he says, I've kept them all. I've kept them all. But really interestingly, he then says, what do I still lack? What do I still lack? Even with that great answer, even with a life that is probably a lot better than most of ours, it's definitely better than mine, he has no sense of security, no sense of reality, no sense that he's right with God, no sense of connection to him. He's just got another list of hoops of things to jump through, and he's got no idea whether he's in or out. He just finishes it with that. I've done all of this, what else do I lack? What else do I need to do? There's a moment in the other Gospels where at this point, everything kind of slows down and we get a window into what's going on in Jesus' heart and in Jesus' mind. Because I think it's in Mark's Gospel, it says this, Jesus looked at the young man and loved him. Looks at the young man and loves him. With all of his doubts and with all of his fears, he looks at this guy and says, hey, my heart goes out to you. Which makes what he does next really, really shocking. Because after that pause, after that moment where we get to see Jesus loves this guy, he's going to do something by the words that he says, which is like taking a hand grenade and lobbing it into his life. In just a few moments, this young man who Jesus has looked at and loved is going to leave him absolutely distraught. Jesus is going to say something which devastates him. And it devastates him because it reveals who he is. It reveals what he really lives for. It's going to show him why he has that lack of peace in his life. So, that's what Jesus does. He holds up a mirror to him and says, you want to know what you need to do? I need to show you who you are. And you're not going to like it. Love does that. Love doesn't always make things nice and comfortable. If you love someone, sometimes you say difficult things. As Josh and Jade bring Freya up at times, because they love her, they're going to have to say things that she doesn't want to hear. First few years, it'll be mostly about biscuits. But it might get bigger as the years go on. So what does Jesus say? He says, if you want to be perfect, if you want to seal the deal, if you want to know you've got peace with God, go sell your possessions, give to the poor, and then come and follow me. And if we're going to get what Jesus is doing here, we have to go beyond the surface level of what's said. We have to not look at those words in a completely wooden way. Jesus is not saying to you, and he's not saying to me, that if you really want to be a Christian, you have to have nothing. That every moment you've got some money, you have to give it away. He's not telling you to sell your car or your house and give all the money to the poor. He's not saying that to you. He's saying this to this particular young man for a very particular reason. He's saying to him, you said a minute ago, you keep all the commandments. let's test that one out. Let's test it out. Let's see how well you do with, you shall have no other gods before me. And he puts his finger right on the thing which this young man lived for, which gave him security, which gave him peace, which he looked to in the crisis moment to get him through things. And it was his money. That's what he relied on. His wealth was the thing that he looked to save him in life. And when faced with putting Jesus above his wealth, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do the thing that he needed to do to have eternal life. That was that young man. I wonder if Jesus were here today and he was having this conversation with you, if you were the young man coming to him, what would he put his finger on in your life? What would he say, this is what you look to give you security in life. This is the thing that you rely on. And it might be, just like this young man, it's wealth and it's money and resources. That might be you. But it also might be a relationship. It might be that all of your hopes and all of your dreams and everything you live for is wrapped up in another person. And they're your savior. It might be that your reputation or your career or something else is what you live for, where you have this nagging sense in the back of your mind that if you lost that thing, you would never actually properly recover. That's what Jesus would put his finger on and say, this needs to be less important to you than me. If you're going to follow me, it's got to be me first and then this thing. He's not necessarily, if you've got someone you love and you think, hey, that sounds like my wife or my girlfriend, he's not saying get rid of them. He's saying put them in their proper place. Because otherwise, if they're the thing that you live for, that'll be the thing that stops you finding peace with God. He's not necessarily telling you cut these things out. He's saying put it in its rightful place. For the guy in the story, his monster, the thing which stopped him following Jesus, the thing which meant that he had no sense of peace, was that he couldn't let God be God. He had to let his money be God. It's what kept him from following Jesus. It's what gave him that sense of lack. What's yours? What's yours? Jesus loves this guy, and he shows him what it is. And the problem this guy had, the tragedy of the story is this: he walks away sad. Jesus has shown him this is what you need to put in its rightful place, and he walks away sad. And then comes the explanation. As this young man walks away, knowing what he now has to do, he's full of grief. As he walks away and as he goes into the distance, Jesus makes this really, really famous statement. It's hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. What he does there is he takes the largest land animal that people knew about at the time in that particular area, and he takes the smallest hole, and he says, it's impossible. Camel through a needle doesn't work. You just can't do it. Not even with a liquidizer can you do that. It just doesn't work. Still won't go through. It'll be mess everywhere. And we have to hear that for what it is. Jesus isn't saying it's really, really, really hard. He's saying it's impossible. If there's something that we think we can do, something that tips the balance so that we're in God's favor, he's saying impossible. You just can't do it. No one can do that one thing which will tip the balance in their favor. When Jesus' disciples hear this, they then say the obvious question: who then can be saved? Who then can be saved? If a rich guy, someone who's apparently blessed by God, can't get there, who can? If this guy who was just like a pillar of the community, no one would have had a bad word to say about him. If he can't make it, who possibly can? And then Jesus says the thing that's key. With man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. And this is where we circle back to where the passage that Paul read for us began. And what we did with Freya earlier is like a massive illustration for us. Because just before this young man comes and falls down at Jesus' feet, there's a really short incident. It was just a couple of sentences from what Paul read earlier. There were people bringing little children to Jesus. And we're talking Freya-sized children, babes in arms, really, really small ones. And Jesus' disciples were doing what his disciples often did. They were acting as the gatekeepers as to who got access to him. And unlike political advisors who always encourage people to kiss babies, they try to stop it happening because whilst children were cherished in their world, they weren't important at this particular moment. Jesus sees their response and he absolutely hates it. He says these words, "Let the little children come to me, because the kingdom of God, eternal life and being secure and knowing that you're part of God's family forever, the thing that the rich man wanted, being part of God's kingdom, belongs to such as these." What that young man wanted and wanted to do something to secure, Jesus is saying people like these little children have got by right. They've got by right. Now, what he's not saying is that little children, because they are children, are in, but people like them are in. So let's think about Freya for a moment. Think about her from earlier on. What quality is it that Jesus is drawing attention to? It's this. At this moment in her life, Freya is utterly dependent on Josh and Jade. They know this very, very well, I'm sure. Her life, her happiness, her comfort, her future are totally in their hands. When she is hungry, she cries. When she's tired, she cries. When she wants something, she cries. I'm not saying all she does is cry, but when she really wants something, all she knows to do is to cry out for it. She is, at this moment, a model of trust and dependence on her parents. Her face, I'm sure, lights up when Josh goes in the middle of the night to check that she's okay. At this moment, there is a pure trust between her and her mum and her dad. She just has this sense that they will make sure everything for her is okay. The teenage years are coming. But right now, she is total, they'll come really quickly. Right now, she is total dependence, total trust. To know that you're right with God, to be able to face anything with a sense of peace, even your own mortality and what comes next, to know you have peace with God, you have to have total dependence on him, where you're not saying, what do I need to do? But what have you done for me? You have to trust what he's already done. What is impossible for man is not impossible for God. Christianity is not about what we do, but what Jesus has done. And there was a little hint of this in the story with the young man. Because what Jesus said to him was this: sell everything you've got, give the money to the poor, and follow me. He essentially said to him, give up everything, pay the highest price you possibly can, and then come and follow me. Then you'll have treasure in heaven. And it might be right now, you're thinking, but that's too big a call. Who could possibly do this? And I don't think any of us could ever do that. I don't think we could ever give everything away and follow Jesus. So whilst the young man couldn't do it, God did. God did. Jesus is his Father's treasure. He is quite simply the most precious thing he has. And what does Jesus do? He comes to earth for us. Not just to teach us, even though he does teach us. He doesn't come just to be an example to us, even though he is an example to us. He comes to give himself completely and utterly away so that we might know him. In just the next chapter, Jesus' disciples are getting things wrong again. They are arguing about which one of them is the greatest, and Jesus says this: he doesn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So what Jesus asked the young man to do, give up everything, he actually does himself. He gives his life as a payment to purchase you. So that if you trust him the way a small child trusts their parents, the way Freya trusts Jade and Josh, you can be forgiven, you can be secure, you can be part of his family forever. So that you're not saying, what must I do? You're saying, thank you for what you've done. You rest in what Jesus has done. And you trust him from that point onwards and forevermore, like a child trusting a parent. And when you see just how much Jesus has paid for you, how much he's given up for you, as you understand that more and more, your trust for him grows more and more. Your treasure slips into the background and he becomes your treasure. Then you have peace with God. Then all of the earn it things that might go in our heads, they evaporate from view because Jesus has done everything. So this morning, as we dedicated Freya to God, she is a little illustration for us of what it means to be a Christian. Total trust, total dependence, total reliance on someone who does it all. That's what Christianity is about. It's not about earning it. It's not about jumping through hoops. It's about trusting what Jesus has done. And that's something that if you're a Christian, maybe you have to go back and remind yourself of again and again and again, because that little sense of I must earn it will always bubble up within us. We have to go back and remember what Jesus has done. And if you're someone who's not a Christian this morning, if you've come to support Jade and Josh, if you've joined us online accidentally because you were looking for a video about something totally different and you ended up here, I want to encourage you to investigate it. And if you wanted to, if anything this morning has piqued your interest, earlier on I mentioned an Alpha course. That's something where you can come along to, ask any questions you want. You can come once and say, I never want to come again, or you can see it through and find out about Jesus. If that's you, I'd encourage you to do it. But earning it is not what you have to do. It's trusting like a little child. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for what we've been able to look at today. We thank you that Jesus tells us that we don't actually, when we truly understand it, have to jump through hoops to become part of your family. There's not something that we have to do which seals the deal. We simply have to trust like a little child. We have to be like Freya is right now with Josh and Jade. We have to totally depend on what Jesus has done. And so, Lord, we would ask that if that's something that we struggle to do, that you'd give us the ability to do it. We ask that if we are always living with that lack of peace, you might show us what Christ has done. And Lord, if we're feeling like the young man, and we don't know how his story ultimately ends, if we're feeling like him, the truth is if he turned around and said, hey, I trust you first, Jesus, he'd have been all right. And so we ask if that's what we need to do, you would help us to do it. So Lord, however we need to respond today, would you give us the strength and the will to respond? And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Our last song this morning is one which perfectly sums up what we've been thinking about. It simply says, who, O Lord, could save themselves? And the answer is no one, because we need a Saviour. So let's stand and let's sing. Let's give praise to God.